Alright, welcome to video number 2, and here we're going to be talking about the units, the pieces in the game. And in this video, I'm going to go through all the different pieces, kind of just give a general talk about them, and then I'm also going to talk about each country and general purchases regarding KGF or KJF scenarios. Again, remember this is just a beginner level video. There's going to be exceptions to what I say, but it's going to be overall pretty beneficial for just getting comfortable with stuff and thinking about purchases. So, uh, first unit on the docket is infantry. If you read Don's essays, I believe, he goes in there. The infantry is the most overpowered unit in the entire game. Uh, at the end of the day, if you don't know what to buy, no matter what country you're on, and you don't know what to do for a purchase, buy infantry. I remember someone telling me that, and it actually makes sense. Even if it's U.S., you'll get them over there eventually. So infantry, they move one at a time, but they're inexpensive. They add up hit points, and they're good for both the defensive and even on the attacking side, especially as they get paired with artillery. Which leads us to our next unit. Our ground unit is artillery. So artillery is definitely adds strength to your offensive part of your ground troops. Um, there's a lot of debates on artillery. There's certainly a right ratio to have, and different people say one way, and some will say another way. The one thing I will say is don't have more artillery than you have infantry, because you're losing the biggest advantage that they make the infantry fire at too as well on attack. So don't overproduce them. Absolutely maximum you want 1-to-1, but really even that's a little bit high because of the cost, and especially if you're in a defensive position. So um, there's a definitely a ratio. I'm not going to get into the details of that right now, but definitely they pair well to each other. Tanks. So tanks they seem like they'd be overpowering, and they're tempting to just buy all in on tanks and go hardcore with them. Um, but at the end of the day, if you're defending, in particular, if you've got 2 infantry versus 1 tank, which would be the same cost, you're going to be better off with 2 infantry versus 1 tank in the defensive side. That being said, tanks do a great job for some timings, for Japan coming in, for Germany. They also do some great jobs of being able to cover large areas, like tanks can in Poland here can come all they can threaten Karelia and West Russia at the same time as they can be getting back to France. So there's definitely some utilization of tanks, but don't think tank cool, buy tank, because it's very tempting. Anti-aircraft. So anti-aircraft guns, they are good for making people make mistakes. They're good for defending big places and big battles like Berlin and Moscow, India. They're going to be good pieces in there when you've got lots of airplanes coming in. Um, Generally, it's not a unit you're going to buy much of, except for in unique situations. Um, but they're there. They're useful. But like I said, for the most part, don't worry about buying AA guns. A lot of times that IPC is going to be better spent elsewhere in the defensive side. Again, unique situations. We come to our C units, and starting with the submarine. I mean, that submarine is your basically kind of like your infantry of the sea, if you will. Obviously, it's a little bit more unique when you start getting into the sea battles, but for the most part, um, subs are your best one for having a hit point out there as well as having some attack power with them. So when you're talking about big navies and whatnot, it's very good to have a lot of submarines in the battle. Transports, pretty straightforward. You need transports to get units from Japan to the mainland, from US to the mainland, and from UK to the mainland. So they're all going to need transports. Destroyers. Um, this is again kind of one of your base units for the warships. A lot of times, most of your navy for warships are going to be subs and destroyers. Subs if you're looking to be attacking and gotta need a less expensive unit that's in a big navy battle. Destroyers are going to be your better one if you're facing a lot of air attacks and whatnot. When it comes down to the defensive build, IPC per IPC, building from scratch, every destroyer is going to be better than buying a carrier and 2 fighters. So if you add them all up there, I think I did the math and my mind's probably going to get the numbers wrong, but if you had 4 carriers and built 4 carriers and 8 fighters versus 17 destroyers, your 17 destroyers are going to be your better defensive weapon and offensive weapon either way. So destroyers and subs are your best IPC for IPC build. Cruisers, again, if you're a beginner, I'm just going to say just don't build cruisers. Yes, there's exceptions, but just don't build cruisers. Same thing with battleships. You're getting very expensive units for very high cost for one unit. So without going into too much, cruisers and battleships are great units. Don't get me wrong. Use the ones that come on the board. Those are the ones that you want to use. There's times that you can build them. Again, just talking for the beginners. Stay away from them. Focus on your destroyers and subs. Aircraft carriers, again, a very expensive unit, and I'm gonna tell you, don't build an aircraft carrier if you don't already have planes on the board that can land on it. If you don't have fighters on the board that can land on the carrier, then it's going to be more costly to build a carrier and a couple of fighters. But if you've got 2 extra fighters out there, then a carrier purchase can't be very much worth it, that you can bring those fighters and land on them. But don't build a whole carrier group from scratch. Coming into the air, fighters and bombers. So, a little confession here. When I did play this game as a board game, my absolute favorite thing was to take those little fighters and put them on carriers. So I'm a little partial to carriers and fighters to give my perfect honesty. But fighters, great defensive unit. They had that roll of 4 for defense, where if you remember, an infantry only has a roll of 2. But again, if I was to spend 30 units, I could get 3 fighters or 10 infantry. 10 infantry is going to be a better defensive unit than 3 fighters is ever going to be. The advantage of fighters is they can move further. You can get further distances. They also have a little bit of attack power to them. But in general, your purchases are going to be better. If you're talking about defense, it's very tempting to go, oh, they got a 4 defense. Again, not always the best. Bombers, certainly, bombers can do the strategic bombing raids. Personally, as a beginner, I would caution away from building lots of bombers and trying to do lots of strategic bombing raids, because I've just seen too many people get upset at the dice. I'm not a dice theorist at all. I think the dice are fine, but seeing a lot of people, when you lose 1 bomber, that was a lot of money you spent just to be destroyed by the AA gun of an eye there. So real quickly, Russia, you pretty much need to be building infantry and artillery. You don't really need to be building anything else. Don't ever build a navy. Just don't. Okay. No matter what someone tells you, just don't build navy. Build infantry and artillery. That should be almost all your purchases. There'll be times for other stuff. I hear people yelling. Yes, there's a tank time. Yes, there's a fighter time. But build infantry and artillery. Next in the play order comes Germany. Germany 2, you're on that land. Again, really, you need to focus on your infantry and artillery. Infantry and artillery. Infantry and artillery. There's some plays for some fighter or bomber here or there. Definitely there's some plays for tank timing. As a beginner, I would not try to do an all tank buy and rush the tanks. Yes, you can be successful with that, but we'll talk about that later. There's a strategy to that. But as a beginner, infantry, artillery, focus them towards Russia and defend Germany. Again, also Navy at this point, it's tempting to try a sea lion and attack UK. Just don't. A competent player is going to be able to defend the sea lion um, at any point in the game. So focus on those ground units again, because that is what's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck. Again, I guess I did skip the industries. Neither Russia or Germany needs to be building industries. They've got great industries already located with a lot of powerful builds there, so you don't need to be worrying about building complexes anywhere with those two units either. All right, so we go to the UK next. So UK, a little bit different. So, I mean, again, every unit, every country, like I said, infantry and artillery are good. But when you start talking about the UK, you do need to focus on getting transports. You need to have at least 3 to 4 transports up here around Britain, so that you can be transporting as many of those 8 units that we can be building onto the mainland. Meanwhile, you're also going to have to build some of the ships sometimes to help defend against Germany's air force and their navy. So just remember, destroyers over here in the Atlantic, you don't need to be building subs. I'll just say that, for the time being, as UK, you don't need to be building subs over here. Um, the other thing that is nice about UK is fighters on a carrier in 3, 6, or 7 can fly right into West Russia or into Moscow in one turn. So building fighters onto the carriers, or even fighters on the mainland, can fly right into West Russia. If they're on a carrier in 6 or 7 that you're putting them, they can fly into Moscow. So there is definitely something to be said about being able to fly fighters in there for UK. Generally speaking, ground units are going to be a good call down in India, just to help defend against Japan coming in a KGF. KJF, again, still ground units down here is probably your best buy to protect yourself from Japan, and you're still trying to build Atlantic Navy when you can to attack Germany. As if you've watched my KJF videos, you know I'm doing something a little bit different, but I'm going to tell you as an old standard play that's a good starting point for beginners. Uh, Next up, we're going to have Japan. Japan, again, KGF. Um, you need to get yourself max production of units going in. So because you can build 8 units off of uh, the mainland, off of Tokyo, you need 4 transports built that are just going from 6061 and just putting units right into Yunnan and funneling them straight in. You're also going to want to build, this is one place that you are going to want to build an industry, a complex probably in here on the mainland, at least one, sometimes maybe even 2. So in a KJF, kill Japan first. There's lots of different defenses. Early on, you want to still try to get to 4 transports in all likelihood. Try to get as many land units onto the mainland, and then start with subs, and really fighters are very good for defending against the U.S. Navy coming in. But early on, I do agree with the concept of just getting as many land as you can the first 1 to 2 maybe 3 rounds, and then start getting lots of subs and lots of fighters and lots of air to defend with. And then lastly, US, again, if we're talking about a KGF, US, you're going to want to have about 8 to 10 transports in here in the Atlantic. So you're going to have to be building transports right off the bat, because you're going to want to be shucking them no matter what route you go. And of course, you're probably going to have to build some surface ships to help protect them. Maybe a carrier or destroyer, early on, and then lots of land units that you're carrying over. In a KJF, in other words, you're trying to do the kill Japan first, you're going to be building a lot of war fleets over here. A lot of destroyers and a lot of subs. A lot of times I'll build one carrier in there, but then otherwise it's a lot of destroyers, a lot of subs, a lot of destroyers, a lot of subs, and that's what you're focusing on. So, they too will be, if you're doing a KJF, you're going to be building industries along those money islands. And in a KGF, even in a KJF, you might even be able to put an industry up here into Norway. So that's my quick rundown of the units. And I hope to see you in the next video.